years of complete silence, 4 years of strategic patience. Then in 2019, when that same mine reopened after $1 billion redevelopment, that refusal made him more powerful than most African presidents and gave him influence over $10 billion in economic development. This is the story of how a traditional king discovered that sometimes the most valuable thing you can own is the right to say no. But this isn't just another story of an African wealth. The question isn't how much he's worth. The question is, how do you build an empire without owning it? To understand how, we need to go back to 2015 to a dying gold mine and to the moment when executives for one of the world's largest mining companies realized something that would change everything: AngloGold. Now, AngloGold Ashanti had tried everything to save Obuasi. Once one of Africa's richest gold mines, for over a century, this mine had been the economic heart of the Ashanti region. 5,000 direct jobs, supporting a town of 200,000 people. But by 2016, illegal miners had invaded, violence had erupted, operations had halted, and AngloGold was losing millions of dollars every month. They had the equipment, they had the technical expertise, but they were missing the one thing that makes mining possible in Africa. That is trust, community consent, the social license to operate. That's when the executives at AngloGold realized something profound about how power actually works in Africa. They needed someone who could restore that social contract. So a delegation of AngloGold executives made the journey to Manhyia Palace, not to summon him to their boardroom. They came to him because in Ashanti region, you don't ask for the king's blessings over the phone. These were desperate executives with a dying asset and an offer no rational person would refuse. But what happened next would teach him something about the difference between ownership and leverage, between control and influence, between what you have and what you can mobilize. Before we get to what happened in that meeting, we need to answer one question that confuses everyone who first learns this story. How rich is Otumfuo Osei Tutu II? Search online and you will get different answers. 10 million, 30 million, some sources won't even guess. So which is it? And why is it so hard to pin down? The answer reveals everything about why those AngloGold executives needed him so badly. Because when you become Asante Hene, occupant of the golden stool, you don't inherit wealth the way most people understand it. You inherit responsibility. You become a custodian of resources that belong to 12 million Ashanti people, not owner, custodian. And that distinction, that's the entire framework. Here is where it gets interesting. Now, Ghana's 1992 Constitution and the Administrator of Stool Lands Act created a specific formula for how money from traditional lands gets distributed. When land controlled by the Golden Stool generates revenue from leases, from mining royalties, from development projects, here is what happens. Now, listen. 10% goes to government administration, 55% goes to local district assemblies for community development, and only 35% goes to the stool for palace operations and community projects. Notice what's missing? Personal enrichment. Notice what's emphasized? Community benefit. The Asante Hene's role isn't to accumulate personal wealth from communal lands, it's to steward them for the people. He's a custodian, not an owner. He's a manager, not a proprietor. So when you Google his net worth and get widely different numbers, that's because most estimates don't know what they are measuring. Otumfuo Osei Tutu II, born Berima Kwekudia in 1950, didn't arrive at the Golden Stool as some ceremonial figure who got lucky. He earned professional qualifications in management and accountancy, not just ceremonial credentials. Serious professional training that takes years to complete. He built businesses in Canada, in Ghana. So when the kingmakers selected him as Asante Hene on April 26, 1999, they weren't choosing a businessman to become a king. They were entrusting a 300-year-old institution to someone who understood both traditional and modern economic systems. Most traditional rulers in Africa face an impossible choice: preserve tradition but remain economically stagnant, or pursue modernization but lose cultural authenticity. Now, Otumfuo Osei Tutu II saw a third path. What if traditional authority itself could be leveraged, not for personal enrichment, But as a platform for regional economic transformation, the framework is surprisingly simple. Traditional authority gives you control over communal resources. That control creates economic leverage, the ability to approve or deny projects. That leverage attracts strategic partnerships, and those partnerships drive regional development, and that development enhances your traditional authority even further. It's a flywheel. But here is a critical condition. The moment you convert authority into ownership, you break the flywheel. $1 billion mine, $1. The chance to become instantly wealthy. What would you do? To understand the stakes, you need to understand Obuasi. For over a century, this mine wasn't just a business, it was the economic heartbeat of the entire Ashanti region. In 2016, AngloGold made the decision. They suspended operations completely. 5,000 workers lost their jobs. An entire regional economy began to collapse. And social problems don't have technical solutions, they have political solutions, or in this case, traditional solutions. Sometime in 2015, approximately 4 years before the world would learn about it, AngloGold executives made that journey to Manhyia Palace. They didn't summon him to Johannesburg. They didn't propose a phone call. They came to him on his terms, in his space, and there, in a meeting whose details remain private but whose outcome would eventually become public, they made an extraordinary offer. They would sell him the entire Obuasi mine, all its assets, all its potential, all its infrastructure, for $1. Think about what this represented. Instant ownership of a world-class gold deposit. But Otumfuo saw something those executives didn't yet understand. He saw the trap. If he accepted, he would become the mine owner, which means he would also become responsible for every accident, every labor dispute, every conflict with illegal miners. More importantly, his traditional authority, his ability to mediate impartially between the company and the community would be completely compromised. But he also understood something about leverage that the executives were about to learn. Ownership looks like power, but sometimes strategic authority is more powerful than direct ownership. So he said no, but he didn't walk away. Instead, he made a counter proposal. He mediated disputes. He brought community leaders to the table with AngloGold executives. Now, in late 2016, they announced their decision, an $881 million redevelopment of Obuasi, the largest mining investment in West Africa that decade. State-of-the-art underground mining technology, modernized processing facilities. But here is a crucial part. AngloGold would operate the mine. Partnership agreements establish community benefits programs. Now, by declining ownership but maintaining his role as a mediator and a custodian, he achieved something remarkable. This is the framework in action. And Obuasi wasn't just the beginning. While the world was watching Obuasi, Otumfuo was already applying the same framework to agriculture, from oil palm to fruit processing to industrial parks. The pattern is consistent, but notice something important. Each success makes the next one easier. Real estate became another leverage point, but again, not in the conventional way. So it's not charity, it's strategic investment. His influence on regional development demonstrably exceeds other traditional authorities. Zoom out to the continental level. Traditional rulers across Africa operate under vastly different systems. Yet, this constraint created his advantage. Because here's the thing about absolute control. It's powerful until it isn't. So what has this model actually achieved? Let's quantify the impact. Employment first. Over 20,000 families now have stable income from initiatives enabled by his framework. Second, infrastructure. Estimated dozens of schools built or supported through school land development revenues and partnership programs. 3. Investment attraction. Over $2 billion in capital brought into the Ashanti region. Human capital. The Otumfuo Osei Tutu II Foundation has provided educational support to thousands of students. But the real legacy isn't in these numbers, it's the framework. a model that anyone with authority but limited capital can study and adapt. Principle 1, leverage over ownership. Principle 2, partnerships over monopolies. Principle 3, community benefit over personal gain. Principle 4, long-term influence over short-term profit. Principle 5, authority is the asset. These principles apply far beyond traditional authority. The real test of this framework won't come in Otumfuo's lifetime. That's why the focus on institutionalization matters so much. Across Africa, traditional authorities control an estimated 80% of land in some countries. What Otumfuo Osei Tutu II has proven is that this ancient cultural institution can drive 21st century economic development without losing its traditional essence. And that traditional authority, rather than being an obstacle to development, might actually be one of Africa's most underutilized economic advantages. So we return to January 2019, to that ceremony. Look at Obuasi now, $1 billion invested in state-of-the-art facilities. Look at the Ashanti region, industrial parks rising, and look at the man who turned down a gold mine. But his influence, over $1 billion investment, $30 million in wealth, $10 million in influence. Which would you choose? The lesson from Otumfuo Osei Tutu II isn't about accumulating wealth. He's proven something more profound. That's not $30 million in wealth. That's 300 years of traditional authority meeting 21st century strategic thinking. And that might be the most valuable asset in Africa's economic transformation.
Omabanye wadama eyarwe woni anije na yedanyame ase yes arwe obuase man ya egu ye kra na ye hwese de be ye besa apagya ma na gina ho bio efie be na ya se num ne me wo ho a na brofu ne me na Eric Spontan mabase na no mine no de adru no de dese yatutum edru ba bi me wo ho a na ye be ka kire me se galamse fo ya akwa adanse shaft no kura ho ama ha nyina flodo edru baby wo mo se atum ye beto ama me $1 man yi nyina ye beto ama me $1 ye betutum de safo na brem man hia me pa wo mo chose ye nyai na me pa baba nyame tumi ti be yi na edru se